Hello there, this is All 24 News coming to you live here from Algiers with me, Karim Zachary. Next up, your headlines. Moscow has been gathering troops and supplies for weeks in preparation for an operation in eastern Ukraine. You'll also be watching in our news former U.S. President Donald Trump rejected calls for tougher gun laws Friday in the wake of the Texas school massacre. A 38-year-old Brazilian man was asphyxiated with gas in the trunk of a police car after he was forced to pull over by highway patrol. Also coming up, top human rights official of the United Nations will hold a press conference Saturday on her controversial trip to China. Hello again, those were today's top stories, and fast, we kick it off from the U.S. Former U.S. President Donald Trump rejected calls for tougher gun laws on Friday in the wake of the Texas school massacre, arguing that good Americans should be allowed to own guns to defend themselves against evil. Hussein Burkan in the following report.
The long-planned National Rifle Association NRA convention, the first American arms lobby, held its annual convention in Houston on Friday, shaken by a controversy over the timing of the event, just after an 18-year-old opened fire at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, killing 19 children and 2 female teachers, plunging the U.S. in the nightmare of school shootings. In front of members of powerful arms lobby NRA, former U.S. President Donald Trump called for arming citizens to fight what he called the evil in their society, which according to him is at the origin of the appalling massacre in Texas.
But the existence of evil in our world is not a reason to disarm law-abiding citizens who know how to use their weapon and can protect a lot of people. The existence of evil is one of the very best reasons to arm law-abiding citizens.
In turn, a Republican Senator, Ted Cruz, supported America's vital right to defend themselves using arms.
If the left disarms America, those crimes would no longer be stopped. Many more single moms in subways would be assaulted or raped or murdered.
The convention witnessed a high mass of pro-gun activists in Texas gather to defend the Second Amendment, which solidifies one of America's most fundamental freedoms, the right to keep and bear arms.
Weapons don't kill people, it's people that kill people. Weapons don't pull their own trigger, you know what I mean? It's not the guns, it's the people.
This comes as senior Texan official admitted on Friday that the police made a bad decision by not quickly entering the Uvalde school where the shooter who committed the massacre had taken refuge.
Hey, from the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now, of course it was not the right decision. It was the wrong decision, period. There's no excuse for that.
There have been 214 mass shootings in which at least 4 people were shot in the U.S. within the first 145 days of this year. Not coincidentally, as the country has a lot more guns. For every 100 Americans, the U.S. has 120 guns.
Moving on now, according to Iranian state media, Greek authorities have seized an Iranian oil tanker off the Greek coast, allegedly under pressure by Washington last month. As a reaction to the incident, Iranian forces seized 2 Greek tankers in the Gulf on Friday, shortly after Tehran warned would take punitive action against Athens over the confiscation of the Iranian oil by the United States. On the other hand, Greek media has described the ship as a tanker carrying Iranian crude oil in breach of international sanctions. A 38-year-old Brazilian man was asphyxiated with gas in the trunk of a police car after he was forced to pull over by highway patrol. The incident has gone viral in Brazil this week, causing outrage across the country. Islam said in this report.
Demonstrations erupted in front of the Federal Highway Police headquarters in Sao Paulo and Sergipe on Friday, where they blocked a road and burnt tires to protest after a video released on social media showed the shocking death of a black man who was held by two officers of Federal Highway Police inside an SUV smoke-filled trunk.
I asked and begged the police, for the love of God, get my brother out of there. And immediately they replied, no, he won't get out.
He put his hand down, put it in his pocket, took out medicine and showed it to the police.
In a statement, the Federal Highway Police said the man had displayed aggressive behavior and was actively resisting the officers who pulled him over. The statement also says Santos fell ill as he was being transported to a police quarter and was taken to a hospital where his death was confirmed. However, primary autopsy from the state's medical institute concluded the man died of breathing failure due to mechanical asphyxia. The independent Brazilian Public Security Forum described the incident as a lack of preparedness from the police on basic procedures.
We understand that today the Federal Highway Police acts are savage, and this is not an overstatement. This is just a continuation of a police practice that we know very well how it works. They enter in communities, favelas and black territories, killing people.
The incident comes just days after officers of the highway police participated in an operation in Rio de Janeiro that left more than 20 people dead.
Hundreds of students protested in the Chilean capital Santiago on Friday, demanding that food subsidies and funds for structural improvements to public schools be allocated in country's budget. However, protests turned violent, and police used their water cannon trucks to put out a bus set on fire by a group of protesters. No arrests had been made and no injuries have been reported. Residents of Colombia's capital, Bogotá, expressed their opinion following the first round of voting on Sunday, May 29th, while two former mayors are on the course to reach the last man standing in the campaign for the country's president, which has high stakes.
We are all waiting to see the change, which is in reality a dream. We know that this is difficult, but it's necessary. Colombia needs empathy on political issues in general, not only in corruption, but also in health issues, lack of quality, and education issues.
Top human rights official of the United Nations will hold a press conference Saturday on her controversial trip to China, including the country's remote Xinjiang region, where the United States accuses Beijing of committing genocide. Michelle Bachelet's trip began on Monday, which she said at its outset was not an investigation. Her visit marks the first time a UN Human Rights Commissioner has had access to China since 2005. At least 37,000 people have fled their homes in 4 days in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo to escape fighting between the army and M23 rebels. Clashes with the M23 have lately occurred in Rutshuru area and have moved this week to the neighboring territory, which is closer to Goma, the seat of North Kivu province. The UN agency said in a statement that UNHCR is deeply concerned about the urgent and significant needs of more than 72,000 people displaced by the fighting since 19th of May. Moscow has been gathering troops and supplies for weeks in preparation for an operation in eastern Ukraine, after Kremlin forces failed to capture the capital during the first phase of the military operation. Sofian Kenturi with more.
Russian soldiers grabbed the core of the railway hub town of Liman and encircled most of the surrounding vital Severodonetsk, causing Ukrainian forces to retreat in the face of Moscow's greatest operation in weeks. In his evening speech, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke of the particularly tough situation in the Donbass, where Russian forces have increased their operation, and he emphasized that Moscow's retreat of its troops from Kiev Oblast and northern regions was just a military strategy to shift to the southern and eastern parts of Ukraine.
As you would expect, the situation in the Donbass is very, very difficult. The occupiers try to achieve in 100 days of war the objectives they hope to achieve in the first days after February 24. Therefore, they have concentrated in Donbass a maximum of artillery, a maximum of reserves. There are missiles, strikes, planes, everything.
Even thought Russia is concentrating all of its forces on the Donbass area. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claims that the local army is resisting to Russian advances and that the Donbass will always be Ukrainian.
We're protecting our territory to the extent that our current defense resources allow. We're doing everything we can to strengthen it, and we will strengthen it. If the occupiers think that Limna and Severodonetsk will be theirs, they are wrong. The Donbass will remain Ukrainian.
Ukraine's foreign minister asked for weapons, saying that without fresh foreign munition, Ukraine's soldiers would be unable to halt Russia's march eastward.
The head of Russian diplomacy, Sergei Lavrov, denounced the West's total war against Russia during a meeting with the officials of different Russian regions and affirmed that it will last for a long period of time. Let's listen.
The United States and its satellites are doubling, tripling, and even quadrupling their efforts to contain Russia, using a very wide range of instruments from unilateral economic sanctions to deeply misleading propaganda in the global media space. The West has announced a total war against us, against the whole Russian world. No one is hiding it. It can be said with certainty that this situation will last for a long time. The cancel culture of Russia and everything related to our country is already reaching the point of absurdity. The classics are banned: Tchaikovsky and Dostoevsky, Tolstoy and Pushkin.
Doubts raise on the ability of the European Union to impose a sixth package of sanctions against Russia, as one of its members, Bulgaria, opposes the step. Hungary transports 96% of its oil from Russia. Any ban would create economic hardship for the country. Nabil Khazini with more insights.
Soon another package of sanctions against Russia will be discussed, but at the same time, it seems that it will be blocked by Hungary's veto on the oil embargo. Many nuances exist between Europeans, but the biggest issue to be tested is the European unity. For 3 weeks, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has opposed the embargo on Russian oil, as he says it would destroy his country's economy. This can be understood, as Hungary transports 96% of its oil from Russia through the Druzhba pipeline, and Budapest is asking for up to 18 billion euros in aid to adapt its infrastructure to a change in oil supplier. Hungarian Prime Minister's chief staff says Hungary needs up to 4 years to shift away from Russian crude.
We can only support this shift if it does not cause unpayable costs for Hungary and the Hungarian families. Today it would. Therefore, we need funds for the shift. An interim period, this is the condition for the support. If the Commission can offer a solution for this, then we are open to back the sanctions. If not, then we ask for an opt-out.
Other countries are in a similar situation. The Czech Republic, Slovakia and Bulgaria have warned they will need more time than most to implement the new sanctions. For the head of the Ukrainian diplomacy, the absence of an embargo on Russian oil in the next package of EU sanctions against Moscow would constitute a break in European unity and its support for Kiev.
We are upset, to say the least, to see how the sixth sanctions package by the European Union is hanging in the air because of the veto, basically de facto veto imposed by Hungary.
The EU starts to raise doubt about its ability to act as a unified bloc, as sanctions against Russia become increasingly painful economically for the European Union. Hence, its application on the ground remains uncertain.
In an interview with the AFP, International Criminal Court prosecutor Karim Khan claimed that Russia could cooperate in the ICC's investigation into alleged war crimes committed since Moscow started its military operation in Ukraine. He also mentioned that investigations are necessary due to the preliminary examination of the situation in the country.
The fact that we have nuclear arms, the allegations that are being raised by different sides of the conflict of genocide and crimes against humanity and war crimes are not just labels, they have international law obligations. And so if one makes those allegations, cooperate, share the information, cooperate with us, and we have, as I said, no agenda. We want to get to the truth. If there's been fake news, we'll expose the fake news. We will not rely upon it, and we will also make it, it can be made known, in due course. But we have to get to the truth.
The war in Ukraine is at the heart of the ceremony organized in Prague to mark the 80th anniversary of the assassination of a senior Nazi official. British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss attended the event to honor the UK-trained paratroopers who killed Reinhard Heydrich, one of the architects of the Holocaust.
The situation today is far removed from that 80 years ago, but we should take inspiration from those who gave everything for freedom. We must ensure that Ukraine wins its brave fight for freedom. Putin is not just waging war on the Ukrainian people, but on the foundations of our societies, freedom, sovereignty, and the rule of law. If he succeeds in Ukraine, we will never feel safe again.
Despite the conditions formulated by Turkey following Sweden's candidacy for NATO, which required the extradition of political opponents and members of the Kurdish community exiled in Sweden, foreign ministers of Romania and Poland, presented in Istanbul, said they are optimistic about the accession of the two Scandinavian states to NATO.
Even if the government is willing to negotiate some terms, they simply cannot hand it over. Perhaps the negotiation room can take place, but not on the extradition of the critics or some other demands, because that's pretty much in the hands of the independent judiciary or other independent government agencies.
Of course, we have discussed about the enlargement, about the accession of Finland and Sweden. We are a firm supporter of the open doors policy, which brings benefits for the alliance as a whole. And we believe that the accession of these two countries will consolidate the collective defense and our security.
Very optimistic about the accession of Sweden and Finland, and certainly given the dynamics of the political and military processes in our part of Europe, it's certainly not going to take years or months, as you were kind enough to put it. Thank you.
Taiwan's air, sea, and land forces are conducting a joint missile exercise in the context of growing tensions in the Taiwan Strait. China is also conducting military exercises around the autonomous island after U.S. President Joe Biden's announcement that the United States would engage militarily to defend Taiwan. At a summit of G7 energy and environment ministers, Germany's Minister for Economy and Climate, Robert Habeck, said that ambition for climate action needs to be raised and that we are doing too little. Let's have a listen.
The commitment that has now been made is that the power sector in 2035 in all G7 countries, and this is already the first innovation, should be decarbonized, and that the coal phase-out is a common goal for the G7.
Despite producing a minimum amount of greenhouse gas emissions, Africa's problems are intensified by climate change. Miriam Zian with more.
With 6 months to go before Egypt hosts the COP27 climate conference, campaigners in Africa and elsewhere are looking to put the continent that is most vulnerable to climate change at the heart of global debate. Despite registering the lowest emissions per capita of any region in the world since 1960, Africa is enduring temperature rises faster than the global average, with dozens of countries devastated each year by severe flooding and drought. whereas Asia, Europe, and North America have each emitted over 8 times more greenhouse gases than Africa. But globally, Africa's people have suffered the most from climate change. The number of droughts has grown dramatically in the last decade in Africa, affecting at least 170 million people. 10 climate most vulnerable countries in the world are all in Africa, and these countries are home to 1/5 of Africa's people. The most vulnerable people to volatile weather are those who rely on agriculture for their livelihoods. And to make matters worse, climate change is hitting the populations already reeling under hunger, food insecurity, and poor health care.
The 52 members of the African Union began Wednesday in Equatorial Guinea, 2 extraordinary summits. The first day was dedicated to the humanitarian situation, which is increasingly worrying because of the consequences of the continent's several crises: health, climate, food, and security. The second day was more political and around 2 issues: the fight against terrorism and the question of unconstitutional changes of power, understanding the coup d'etat, which have taken place over the past 2 years, were discussed during the summit. To more national news now. Sonatrach and its partner Sinopec on Saturday signed in Algeria a production sharing contract related to the Zerzaitin area in Elysee. With the framework of the contract, Sonatrach and Sinopec undertake to implement the program of development and exploitation as stipulated in the approved development plan. The conclusion of this contract is a continuation of the 2 companies' traditional partnership to enhance their cooperation in the field of hydrocarbon production. The United Nations WFP warns that rising food prices in Malawi are pushing the poor to the brink of starvation. The country has the 4th highest percentage of people living in extreme poverty in the world, and the UN spokesman explains that Malawi's challenges are now further exacerbated by the effects of the Ukrainian crisis due to disruption of food exports.
The United Nations World Food Programme, WFP, is seriously concerned about the soaring food prices that are pushing the poor to the brink of hunger in Malawi. WFP assessment has found that these challenges are now further exacerbated by the effects of the Ukraine crisis. 50% of Malawi's population is already living in poverty, on less than $2 a day. Prior even to these price hikes, we need $2.9 million now to be able to provide about 22,500 families who were affected by floods with assistance. We also need an additional $3.4 million to continue providing vital food assistance in the form of unconditional cash to refugees and asylum seekers at a full food ration.
According to the most recent official data from Belgium, authorities, over 27,000 individuals have died as a result of euthanasia in Belgium since it was legalized 20 years ago on May 28, 2002. Concerned parties have pointed to the country as an example of slippery slope, that such laws will inevitably lead to. Belgium serves as an instructive case study for other countries considering legalization. Though euthanasia was once authorized under tight conditions, recent changes to the legalization have made Belgium the first and only country in the world to have no lower age limit for minors. All right, let's have a reminder of our top stories. Moscow has been gathering troops and supplies for weeks in preparation for an operation in eastern Ukraine. Former U.S. President Donald Trump rejected calls for tougher gun laws Friday in the wake of the Texas school massacre. 38-year-old Brazilian man was asphyxiated with gas in the trunk of a police car after he was forced to pull over by highway patrol. And finally, watch top human rights official of the United Nations held or will hold a press conference on Saturday on her controversial trip to China. That's it for me and the rest of the English team. Thank you for tuning in to our channel. Bye for now.